Light from Lantern presents Knit a Spell. I'm Magical Maker, Katie Rempe.
And I'm the Maker of Magic, James Devine.
Join us as we stitch together the symbiotic relationship between crafting
and the craft.
Hey Jim, welcome to episode 22, Going in Circles. How are you?
I am awesome. I hear this episode is going to be kind of amazing.
I'll tell you what, when I first had the episode for this, or for the idea for this episode, I planned out everything that I wanted us to talk about in September under the symbology umbrella, you know.
Yeah, we talked about like the Ouroboros and the Mobius Strip, like this idea, and it totally made sense. Like, oh yeah, maybe knitting or whatever has this circular quality. Yeah, sure.
Exactly.
No big deal. It's just on our list. One of the things on our list.
Exactly. So I was like, okay, well, I think it's time that we tackle that one. And so my research began, and I'll tell you what, it went from a very simplistic idea where I thought, okay, you know, an Auroboris and a Mobius, they both have similar shapes. Let's now explore what they are and then some of the magical qualities about them, you know, as we often do in our episodes. However, as I began my research and to deepening the connection between the two, it quickly became obvious that the theme at the heart of this episode was bigger than I had anticipated.
What?
Yeah, I know. So we're going to do things a little bit different, and I'm going to tell you the tale of me learning about the Ouroboros and the Mobius and how they tie to each other in both the sort of magical, existential kind of way and just in knitting. So,
dun, dun, dun.
I know.
I can't wait. Oh my God, this is cool. Well, I'm on for the ride, the loop-de-loop, and the circular ride.
That's right.
And we'll see how it comes back around. And I'll try to make as many circular, infinitely, spiral puns as I possibly can.
Please don't let me down. That's usually my job. So I'm counting on you.
I'm here for it.
Awesome. Okay. So where do we start? Obviously, the same place I started, which was what exactly is an Ouroboros? Because you know, it's one of those things where you hear the word and you're like, oh, I kind of maybe know, like it's a circle maybe, or like a sideways 8, if you will, you know, the infinite symbol, but what is it and why it start, right?
Yeah, I mean, people think of the lemniscate or the infinity symbol. Yes. Right, which is, if you're familiar with the tarot cards, that's a symbol above the magician in the magician card, right? And it's that sideways 8. I think of the Ouroboros as being the serpent eating its tail symbol, right?
Exactly. Well, it's funny that you say that because it literally means tail devourer in Greek.
Tail, it does? Oh, I didn't know that. Tail devourer. Hard to say in English.
Yeah, I know.
But Ouroboros is also hard to say.
Yeah, well, I was calling it Ouroboros at one point, and I was like, wait, no, am I thinking of Roy Orbison? Because that is not correct.
Was it Ray eating his tail? Are his songs circular?
Yeah, maybe.
Ray Ouroboros.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because loops do appear in music. So kind of, maybe.
Whoa.
I know. It turns out the Ouroboros is super compelling as a symbol because it has been around for like a millennia, appeared in numerous forms in an array of contexts and geographies, and was probably most originally depicted, as we said, with the snake eating its own tail in a closed circle. Supposedly, the oldest appearance of this symbol was in the shrine of Tutankhamun, or, you know, King Tut, back in the 13th century BC. So It's been around for a hot minute.
That's a long time. That's amazing to think, even back in Egypt. And it makes me wonder, did someone actually witness this behavior in actual animals?
I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting that it would be the snake, right? Or as we'll find out, not only a snake, it's often like a serpent or a dragon or something along those lines, but it's always almost that like reptilian long symbol.
So, I mean, we see dogs chasing their own tails.
That's true.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah, they're going in circles too.
It's kind of fun.
Yep. Well, they're getting information through that circle too. Yeah. The symbology in terms of Egypt, at least, referred to the mystery of the cyclical nature of time, of how it flows back into itself. The ancient Egyptians understood time as a series of repetitive cycles and instead of linearly moving. And constantly evolving. And that was central to their idea of thinking about everything, mainly because, the Nile and the sun were two like physically evident symbols of this happening. So that was very interesting. And much like the sun, it goes under its own journey. Let's see. And then
above the sun, above and below. And we had talked about that on the sun and moon episode.
Yep.
The sun goes above and below. Mm-hmm. And so is that part of the Ouroboros symbolism also?
Yes.
Is that circular journey of the day and night?
Yes. In fact, once the Egyptians had their time with this symbol, the Greeks also took it up, especially the alchemists in the old Hellenistic Alexandria days. So that is also the oldest alchemy signs that is also used. So, of course, it's crossing over into a new branch, right? But essentially symbolizing something very similar. In this case, it's eternity, the endless return, again, the very cyclical nature of time and the unity of beginning and end. So similar to how the Egyptians were looking at it.
Yeah, of course, this circular idea of what is ending is beginning. And that sort of, it always comes back around.
So it continues to be a very attractive symbol, as we then find it is very significant to the Gnostics as well. From their viewpoint, opposite ends of the Ouroboros were interpreted as the divine and earthly in man, which, despite being at odds with one another, exist in unison nonetheless. It's also very similar in sense to the Chinese yin yang, again, as we were talking about in our last episode. So it all comes back around, right?
I see what you did there.
Hey. Yep. So, and then it continues to grow in traditions like around Norse mythology, there we go, Hinduism, Mesoamerica, even in one of their deities. It's the one with the Q that looks like the snake. Go figure.
Oh, right.
So if that weren't enough, of course, then the Renaissance period comes through, and that's where the alchemists really get a hold of it. Again, representing the infinite nature of time. It was seen in the eyes of the alchemists as being the ultimate obstacle for them to overcome in their magnum opus. So their incessant struggle for becoming immortal, their chief aim, meant to break this circular cycle of the Ouroboros once and for all.
Oh, so the cycle sort of implied that there would be an end, or like that the cycle would be broken. Thus, you lived outside of the cycle of life and death. Is this the idea?
Yes, and by discovering the Philosopher's Stone, that's the key to eternal life. Thus, stepping outside the bounds of
this mortal coil.
Yes, indeed. So.
I see. That's fascinating, because I guess I think about the cycle being sort of that eternal cycle, but that's an interesting way to think about it, is the Philosopher's Stone would give us access outside of that.
Exactly.
Wow, this is so interesting.
Yeah, things I never even thought about the relationships between this.
Deep symbolism. Okay, so what else did you find?
Okay, so then one of my favorite examples was, say we scale back viewing everything to all that there is, right? All that exists would be in one unit, and in this unit would be virtually everything from the physical to abstract, sharing the same repetitive pattern of birth and of death and of instance. A human being is subject, as we know, to birth, growth, maturity, and death. And so is civilization, and so is seasons, and so is virtually everything subject to things that create are subject to death, and death creates. So in a way, creation creates creation. Even in death, something is growing. So,
and I had just had this conversation this past week where I'm like, we were talking about death and the death card in the tarot. And I'm like, well, yeah, the death card in the tarot, people are always like, it doesn't mean death.
You're right.
And I'm like, yeah, it does also mean death. Yeah. It doesn't just mean death, and it doesn't mean death and it's a scary thing, but it's okay for it to mean death because like
symbolically.
And we were talking about this over lunch. And it was we just happened to be having a vegan lunch, right? And I'm like, you know what we're doing right now? Death. Yeah. You are eating the death card, literally. Because that salad and that hummus that you're eating with those carrots is death. You're participating in death right now because those garbanzo beans wanted to live. That's right. Right? Like that poor little salad, right? And that is the most alive food. Like those little greens are still alive and you're munching them to death.
Yeah.
Right.
They live to die.
And
like us all.
Right. And through that death, you are alive.
Yeah. It gives you energy. It creates energy. Their death creates energy.
It's actually that moment. Like the Ouroboros, what's interesting about the Ouroboros isn't necessarily the body of the snake. Like everything that we look at on that image of an Ouroboros, we don't really pay much attention to what's below. Like the circle, it's just, we're not looking at the scales or at the little feet here and there. We might notice them, but we're attracted to one part of that circle of the Ouroboros. And what part of the Ouroboros do we stare at? It's where the mouth is eating the tail.
Yes. The action.
Every time you have lunch, that's what you're doing.
Right?
This is like death and life is occurring.
Yeah, you're completing
every
cycle.
time. Yeah. Right. Every time you're eating a meal, even if it's a vegan meal, even if it's, of course, if you're eating a steak, it's a lot more evident. Right.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
Sure. Right. Anyway, so it's a very interesting conversation. It's just reminding me of what you're talking about, that like life and death are completely connected.
Yes,
and
it is the balance of everything.
When we look at the nebula in the universe, right, in the galaxy, that's the birthplace of stars. And what is a nebula? It is the remnants of an exploded star, right? It's the it's the clouds of a star that has gone supernova, and it's where those gases and everything collapse and create stars. And so, in that, decaying remnants of the body of a star, new stars are formed. It's literally, the cycle is everywhere we look.
Yes, everywhere. So much so that it's ingrained in everything from, the flowers that you look at to the religions that, people live by, to everything. So, which brings me to another fun thing that I read, which was, this little myth that we may be familiar with, one from the Aramaic Adam and Eve, So these were people of Earth, the first people of Earth, created by God in his image, right? And they were innocent and unashamed in their nakedness, spent their days in eternal, Garden of Eden, super duper, allowed to eat anything they want, of course, as we know, except from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So one day, a little snaky, as we know, comes up and persuades them to eat the apple. And when God found out, he said, well, now you have to leave, and you're condemned to suffering just like the rest of us. So, at least in this example that I found, it was very interesting that they would say, that man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. And, it's highly disputed what exactly good and evil is. But for me and for a lot of people, it doesn't really mean like good and evil. It just means like having an awareness of self and a yearning for knowledge. So, sometimes that's one thing that really differentiates humans from everything else. We want to learn. we want to fail. I mean, we don't want to fail, but like we do want to learn. And sometimes that's part of the failing. So yeah. So it's interesting that many people would consider the snake evil when I actually interpret it as more of a symbol of knowledge and wisdom.
Right. Yeah, a totally different or valid interpretation of that story is you can't stay in the Garden of Innocence.
Yes.
If you have knowledge.
Well said.
If you have knowledge of something, it is that you have graduated out to the world of creation and of creativity, and that you've leveled up. You're no longer a baby.
Well, there you go. Yes, you've leveled up. Yes.
And so you can't be in the Garden of Innocence now that you have knowledge from the tree of good and evil, right? Yep. Or the tree of the Ouroboros.
Mm-hmm. Yes, right? Exactly.
The tree of yin and yang, of the tree that has the tree that has of wisdom.
Mm-hmm. So I thought that was very interesting. You know, I mean, my family has a Catholic kind of background, and it never really resonated with me. But now that I kind of know a lot more about a lot more in general, kind of, I don't know, I have like a different viewpoints from it quite often, which is great.
And isn't it interesting that Catholicism has, well, and not so much these days, and it does depend on which type of Catholicism, you know, and which sort of, you know, if it's more of a conservative, restrictive, or whether it's more expansive and liberal. But the more restrictive and conservative Christian religions, or any conservative, restrictive religion, eschews knowledge and doesn't want its adherents to learn or to be wise. And so wisdom is demonized. And so the early church made the snake into something evil and made the tree the knowledge of good and evil. And, you know, I'm curious about, you know, snakes are often seen as symbols of wisdom.
Yes.
And that tree of knowledge, you know, sometimes it's said to be the tree of good and evil. Sometimes it's said to be the tree of knowledge or the tree of wisdom.
There you go.
So, like, it's really interesting how suddenly wisdom or knowledge is demonized, you know, when that then becomes in conflict with just do what this restrictive religion says, do what the church says, and stop thinking for yourself.
Right.
Right. Just do what the patriarchy says. Do what the man says.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll tell you what to be scared of. We'll tell you what to not be scared of. Don't think about anything.
Tithe your 10% and shut up.
That's right. That's right. We'll be accepting your donations at the end. Yeah. Yes. So doing your own research, that's why it's so important, especially if it's a topic that scares you, just like we talked about last week. So, all right. So we're going to take a quick break because in the second half, we're going to kind of come around to where this picks up with the knitting end of the spectrum. So we will be right back. Hey, magical makers, guess what? You can now get Sun and Moon yarn kits from uuyarns.com. That's EWE yarns.com. My Sun and Moon shawl features 2 different weights of yarn. A smaller version can be made in fluffy fingering, and a larger version can be made out of woolly worsted. Both of these 100% merino yarns are superwash, and the color combinations are amazing. I even worked with Heather at UU Yarns to pre-coordinate several color combos that I think you guys will love. Learn more in our show notes or check out the kit at uuyarns.com. Hey, Jim, let's talk about a palm reading for a sec.
Oh, yeah, my favorite topic.
So I don't think a lot of people necessarily think of getting a palm reading, but my palm reading with you was awesome, and it actually helped with a lot of preconceived notions that I had of the craft before now.
Oh, you had preconceived notions about palmistry? What were they?
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, I'm pretty literal. So I thought having a short lifeline might mean you have a short life.
Right.
And that a star on your palm is bad.
Oh, that's interesting. Both of those are comment, a short lifeline does not mean a short life. It actually means a life of connection with the divine and learning and creating type of life. And a star in your palm is a sign of spiritual gift. Those are two things that are dispelled right away. I know there's a lot of things on the palm that people think are good or bad, right? There's nothing inherently negative in your palm. You can use all the tools, all the markings. They are associated with your strengths, your personality, and things you can use in your life.
Absolutely. I really love that modern take on palmistry, and it actually really resonated in my reading. I think everyone would enjoy a reading from you. And dear listener, if you too would like a fantastic experience that offers insight, direction, and clarity, I highly suggest booking a session with my dear friend, James Devine, and you can find more information at thedivinedhand.com. Thanks for listening. Let's jump back into our episode. Welcome back. All right, Jim. I know I've been talking your ear off, but I know you want to know how this all comes back to the knitting world, right?
Well, I mean, we always talk about the magic, right? And yes. I think about this having to do with knitting because I just think about like knitting in the round. I think about knitting being like, I think about the yarn being a snake. I think about, I have those two needles that are connected with like the plastic sort of connector.
The cord,
So I think of that kind of being, and they come together, right. As I'm knitting. So I guess I think about that kind of being an Ouroboros in a way.
Absolutely.
Like, sort of like as I'm knitting them together, right? And that's the action is like they're always sort of together. But I think that I'm still a beginner and that's all I can think of.
How dare I put you on the spot?
That's all I can think of. I'm not on the spot, but
that's great.
Are any of those close?
That is a lot close.
Did I get it right, teacher? Did I get it right? Do I get an A?
You did. You did. And you probably don't know just because you're new into the game, but the Mobius for the knitting community has an even deeper meaning because it can be physically created by a cast-on. But
wait,
pause. We'll come back to that because first,
okay, good.
I need to explain a little bit more about the magic of this symbol because part of what I learned about this, because I do deep dives. If I'm going to learn something, I'm going to learn it all. And one thing that I saw in my research was a person named Carl Jung, and that's Jung. So I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong.
Carl Jung.
Yes. He was a famous psychiatrist in Freud's time that created the archetypes for, the introvert and extrovert, right?
Right.
And so he said that this archetypal image of the Ouroboros resides in the collective unconsciousness. In the Jungerian analytical view, humanity from this concept shares the collective soul that contains reoccurring themes. This can be done through dreams. One such dream state that this symbol came about in was the molecular structure of benzene. Right? And it was inspirationally revealed to Auguste Kekulé as he dreamed of what it would look like as a chemical compound. It had already been discovered, but nobody knew what it looked like as the chemical compound yet. And so through a daydream, it just came to him, right? And he was able to flesh out what it looked like, and it became, a huge help for all the aromatics.
Can I just pause? So
please.
What's interesting about benzene is that it is a hexagon. It's a hexagon of carbons. So a hexagon is the shape of a bee, like a beehive, like the...
Oh, yeah. Honeycomb.
Like a honeycomb shape, right? And so it's that six-sided shape. And carbon atoms will bond to each other. It's one of the characteristics of carbon atoms. Silicon will also do it, but that's when we are carbon-based life forms. And so one of the interesting things about humans and carbon-based life forms on Earth is that carbon will bond to itself and is sort of the basis of many organic compounds like fatty acids and sugar molecules and many other things. So benzene is a really fascinating molecule because it is a ring of carbons. It's 6 carbons with then helium atoms bonded to it. So it's this really beautiful, sort of perfect little molecule that is circular in shape, which is I wanted to describe that for people, but it is a circular shape. And that's why we're talking about the Ouroboros, talking about the circular shape with what benzene is. And so this archetypal sort of idea of a circle and circular shapes that sort of are there. When I can't help but wonder about the DNA structure. Like that's a spiral, right? And carbon is very, very much a part of the DNA structure. Although that's a spiral, not a circle, it is very interesting that the DNA is a helix, right? It's a spiral shape. So it's very interesting. Okay, so we said a word earlier and didn't define it. So we said the word Mobius.
Yes.
So will you define what is Mobius? Who is Mobius?
Yes.
Can you go down that rabbit hole with us?
So essentially, Mobius, or Mobius, spelled two different ways, but the same thing.
The one with the umlaut over it?
Exactly.
Must have been a German person.
That's a good point, yes. In mathematics, a Mobius strip, or band, or loop, is a surface with only one side and only one boundary curve. The Mobius strip is the simplest non-orientable surface. So you can never get it flat. It's just a pain to fold. Oh my gosh.
You can make one.
Yes.
And how you make one is you take a strip of paper, take a thin strip of paper, and that has two sides. And you just give it a half a twist and tape those two ends together. And then if you take a marker and you just follow it all the way along, eventually the line will meet itself.
Exactly.
And it's very cool.
Yes. It's so cool that you can do exactly that thing in knitting. And that is it's a modified Mobius cast on, or like the easy way to do it would be when you join it in the round, instead of, most instructions will say, do not twist, or be careful not to twist when joining. Well, this one you would intentionally put one twist in to make the Mobius. However, many knitters will know the term Mobius as a cast-on method that was created by one of the coolest, most interesting, like totally mind-blowing designers in our time, Cat Bordhi. Cat Bordhi just unfortunately recently passed last year, but what she did in our world of knitting was insane. And so here is a little bit about her technique. As I said, some may know this, it was invented by Cat Bordhi. She's a visionary of our modern time. She researched about creating this technique, and after I saw her book, A Treasury of Magical Knitting, a collection of Mobius designs featuring her cast-on technique, I read that I wanted to know, like, okay, well, what inspired her to even, like, care about a Mobius, right? You can just cast on and twist it and just do it that way. Why do you want to do something else? Well, under her book description for this one, she says, I fell under the spell of the Mobius knitting in 2002 after jumping out of bed one night with the sudden realization of how to cast on for a Mobius. Now, we just heard how our previous scientist friend had like intuited the information from a daydream as well. Is it a coincidence that Kat had a very similar, experience with this? And that then for a whole year, she was just totally obsessed with it and made 2 books and like probably over 100 designs. Wow, is this proving Carl Jung's point?
Yeah, that Carl Jung said that the Ouroboros is an archetype that is embedded within the human psyche. And his theory was, like, Katie said, there are these archetypes. I mean, Jungian psychology is this idea that there are archetypes embedded within our psychology. That this idea of the cyclical idea of the Ouroboros is one of those archetypes, right? And that sort of Cat had this, idea, oh my God, I could knit in this Mobius way in a dream, similar to the scientist that intuited the molecular structure of benzene.
Exactly.
Wow, that's a trip. That's so cool.
I got chills, Jim. I think this was the moment where I was like texting you like, oh my God, I can't wait to tell you what I just learned.
I was like, wow, Katie.
Yeah. What is that exciting about circles?
Cool.
I know. I can't help but wonder if maybe Cat also liked snakes. I just am curious.
Right?
Yeah. So
Amazing.
a couple other things about Cat Bordhi that were interesting that I wanted to share was so like I said, last July, Kat announced on her blog that she was dying, which is of course a huge hit because, like I said, she had touched a lot of people. She was a huge instructor, not just designer. I don't recall meeting her, but I just missed her when I first started at Skacel, because I ended up, one of my first jobs there was to edit all of these videos that she had just taken being in town. So it was kind of funny that I was like, oh, I have like, a sort of side connection with her. Well, I wanted to know, more than just that she was a really good instructor and that I loved editing her videos. So I went back and looked at this post and, she shares a story, Jim, that I think you will really appreciate. She says, when I was 12, my rascal friend Janet and I stepped into the lair of Madame Marla, who emerged behind beaded curtains with a dish rag in her hand. She had just been washing dishes as we jangled the doorbell. For $2, she agreed to read our palms. The fact that, she was so open-minded that she would go to do something like that even at a young age. And, I don't think she ever lost that sense of wonder through her whole life. I thought that was really interesting. And I actually got extra chills because we know a local palm reader named Marla. So, Mystic Marla. So I was like, ooh.
She's in Spokane. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. And so I thought, oh my gosh, what an incredible coincidence. And then, like I said, we were scheduling this episode. The topic kind of like jumped a little bit from different weeks. And I just happened to realize, since I had been doing so much research, that the 19th of September was the day she passed. And so our episode will come out within 3 days of her passing. So I almost feel like it's her reaching through, a little bit. And so if that's true, then let's thank her for all of her awesome work and everything she left behind, because truly people get remembered, but legends never die, So
yeah, amazing. Yeah. Amazing.
So things I didn't think I was going to make connections of when I just started.
And it does all come around, right? It really does.
Yeah.
What a fantastic story. And that it comes back to, Kat and the difference she made. And it continues, the cycle continues, right?
Yep.
Well, Kat didn't really die. She just found the Philosopher's Stone and stepped off the mortal coil.
There you go. Yeah, great point. I feel like she would totally agree with that too.
Well, in a way, it's true, right? Because her work and what she contributed to the fiber crafting world and her amazing work. I mean, anyone can look up. I mean, we'll have links in the show notes. Absolutely. And I think her website, Cat Bordhi, that's CatBordhi.com, is still active, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, that's pretty amazing to just, be able to look at her stuff and be inspired today. These forward-thinking artists and people, their legacy continues. And I think that's a really cool thing. And this is how, she inspired you, right? And
exactly. In ways I didn't even realize she would. So thank you, Kat. Appreciate it.
You get to continue that as another segment, another cycle of that Ouroboros. Right?
Yeah. And, by her really donating the information on how to do this cast on to make this Mobius, because it's not easy, but it's worth it. You cast on in the middle of a project, Jim, and you knit out both sides from it using her technique. So you end up casting on the outside of both of the cowl pieces, we'll say, at once and knitting them all together in this insane way that she figured out. I highly recommend YouTubing this because it's a mind blow.
What do you end up with?
You end up with an infinite cowl, a Mobius loop, but without starting with a strip.
So you don't have to sew it together.
No.
Like I would think that a Mobius, you would knit like a scarf and you'd twist it and stitch it together at one end. It'd have a seam. So this is this is a seamless Mobius.
Mm-hmm. You're knitting like the eternal
figure
shape.
8.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's crazy.
Whoa.
Crazy. Yeah, not the easy way, that's for sure.
She's a physicist.
For real. Yes. So
very cool.
Very interesting. So now I know a lot of people who have used that technique to then create their own designs. So
it continues.
So, yes.
Amazing.
Exactly. So
yeah. Wow, that's so cool, Katie. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you for letting me go on my little tangent. Hopefully others will enjoy it too. So, all right. Awesome. Well, let's wrap by just saying what we might have going on. I know a lot
going on.
Yes, I currently am running, as you know, my birthday sale starting.
Yay! Happy birthday! Happy birthday!
That's right. So all my self-published Light from Lantern patterns are 20% off through the 19th of September, 2021. No coupon required. Just add them to your cart and they will go automatically. So I really appreciate your support and hopefully you'll find something you like for the upcoming knitting season. Hooray!
It's a great deal. I know it's sweater weather's coming, so get yourself knitting something.
That's right, sweaters.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, this weekend, if you're listening and you listen in time, this weekend, which is September, I better look at a calendar before I screw it up. September 17th, 18th, 19th.
Yes.
I'm presenting at the Astromagia conference, which is an online conference. And if you listen to this, today's Wednesday or Thursday, you can still, I think, register for Astromagia, probably up to the last second. My presentation is on Sunday, the 19th. And I'm presenting a talk. There are amazing presenters. I'm presenting a talk on the modern mudras, harnessing the planetary power on your palms. Pretty amazing conference. Not that expensive to attend, and the level,
virtual, right?
It's virtual. It's online, and the level of people who are presenting are off the charts. So highly recommended. Well, yeah, there's me, but there are people who are. I'm just like, whoa. So
even
highly recommended.
All right.
And if you subscribe to my email list, mid-October, I'm going to be teaching Intro to Palmistry, the Divine Hand Method. And that I'm announcing now. It'll be mid-October. Get in. If you're on my email list, there'll be a special. If you're not on my email list, there won't be a special. You'll just have to learn about it on social media.
Ooh, snooze you lose.
So,
all right.
FYI.
Very good.
But you know whose email list you should really subscribe to?
What?
Light from Lanterns.
Oh my gosh.
List. And you can do that at lightfromlantern.com and follow Katie at Light from Lantern on Instagram. And also Knit a Spell. We're on Instagram and check us out. And leave a comment or review us on any of the podcast platforms. And thank you for listening. Or just listen. You don't have to do any of that. Just enjoy it.
Yeah, just keep listening. Appreciate it. Tell your friends. Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, if you guys have any thoughts on our episode or the Ouroboros or Mobiuses in general, please reach out. You can always email us at knitaspellpodcast@gmail.com, or like Jim said, reach us, DM us on our Knit a Spell Instagram account. But yeah, otherwise, we can't wait to see you next week. Until then, everybody, we'll see you later. Bye, Jim.
Bye, everybody.
This episode is a wrap. If you enjoyed what you heard, go ahead and follow us on your favorite podcast streaming app. And don't forget, you can see full video episodes of Knit a Spell on Light from Lantern's YouTube channel.